In 1999, 8 girls arrived at a New Year's Eve sleepover with pizza money and sleeping bags and dreams of staying up until midnight. But they never made it to the countdown, never saw the ball drop, never hugged their parents goodbye one last time. No screams, no struggle, no trace, just 8 empty beds and cold pizza, and parents who would spend the rest of their lives wondering what happened in those final hours before the world changed forever. But 28 years later, when a house fire forces firefighters to inspect an old chimney, so are their party hats, and what's written inside them will unravel a truth more horrifying than anyone imagined. Before we start, hit subscribe to help uncover stories they tried to bury and make sure no name stays forgotten. The smoke had settled thick over Riverside County, like a lid no one dared lift. It clung to the bare winter branches curled under streetlights and silenced the sound of sirens on wet pavement. You could drive past a crime scene and not realize you'd witnessed the end of 8 childhoods. That's how secrets buried themselves around here, quietly and without witnesses. It was just past dawn when the call came. County Emergency Coordinator Emma Chen had just poured her first coffee when the radio crackled through. Structure fire at 1247 Maple Street. Firefighter requesting emergency coordinator. Chimney inspection revealed unusual evidence. Party hats, vintage condition, appear to be from missing children case. Emma stood frozen in the silence of her kitchen, the mug warming her palm. Her other hand reached automatically for the emergency kit she always kept by the door, but she didn't need to check the address. She knew that house by heart. 8 girls, 1 sleepover, vanished. December 31st, 1999. They were students from Riverside Elementary, her school, her grade, her friends. She'd been sick that night, asthma attack, and for nearly 3 decades, she'd carried that small, strange guilt like shrapnel beneath her skin. She slid the untouched coffee into the sink, grabbed her keys, and left the house without setting the alarm. The drive to Maple Street was quiet and slow, the smoke dulling sound and stretching time. Bare trees rose on either side of the narrow residential road like silent witnesses. Emma passed the old playground, now rusted and overgrown, and turned onto the street that had once been filled with children's laughter. The neighborhood where she'd learned to ride a bike, learned to trust neighbors, learned that monsters could live next door. When she arrived, the fire truck was still there. Yellow tape blocked the driveway. The house looked smaller than she remembered, sagging porch, paint peeling, windows boarded up years ago. But in the front windows, 7 candle holders sat in a neat row, just like they had every New Year's Eve for 28 years. She'd never understood why the families kept lighting those candles. Now she wondered if they'd been waiting for this moment. Fire Captain Jake Morrison met her at the tape. His face was grim. "Ma'am, we didn't touch anything once we saw what it was. You'll want to see this." He led her around to the side of the house where the ladder truck was positioned. The chimney had been partially dismantled for safety inspection. On a tarp beside the truck sat 8 party hats, faded but intact, the kind kids wore at birthday parties with elastic strings and glittery designs. But these were old, the cardboard was brittle, the colors muted by time. And someone had written on them. Emma knelt beside the tarp, her hands shaking. She could see writing on the inside of each hat, small, careful letters in different colored pens, children's handwriting. "Tell my mum I love her, and I'm sorry I forgot to feed Whiskers. Emma got sick. Maybe she can tell everyone what happened to us. If you find this, we tried to be brave like Emma taught us." Her throat closed. She recognized the handwriting. Sophie Chen, no relation, but they'd shared a last name. Jenna Martinez, who sat behind her in math class. Maria Santos, who taught Emma how to braid friendship bracelets. They'd known. Somehow, in those final moments, they'd known they might not come home. And they'd tried to leave messages for the people they loved. Captain Morrison crouched beside her. "There's more," he said quietly. "Each hat has something written inside, like they were hiding messages." Emma stood, her legs unsteady. She pulled out her phone and called Detective Rosa Morales. Rosa had been a rookie in 1999, barely 25 years old when the case went cold. Now she was nearing retirement, and Emma knew she'd never forgiven herself for the investigation that went nowhere. Rosa answered on the first ring. "Emma, what's wrong?"
"They found something at the house, the girls' party hats. Rosa, there are messages inside them."
A long pause. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. Emma walked back to her car and sat in the driver's seat, staring at the house. She'd driven past it thousands of times over the years. Sometimes she'd slow down and wonder if she could feel them somehow, if there was some trace of that night still lingering in the air. She'd been supposed to go to that party. Madison Walsh had invited the whole class to celebrate the new millennium. Emma had been so excited she'd helped plan the games they'd play, the snacks they'd eat, the countdown they'd do at midnight. But 2 days before the party, her asthma had flared up. Bad. The kind of attack that sent her to the emergency room, gasping for air. Her parents kept her home that weekend, afraid she'd have another episode. She'd cried. 11-year-old Emma had sobbed into her pillow because she was missing the coolest party of the year. Her friends would have so much fun without her. They'd have inside jokes she wouldn't understand. They'd bond over shared memories she'd never have. She'd been angry at her lungs, angry at her parents, angry at the universe for making her sick at the worst possible time. She'd had no idea her broken breathing had saved her life. Rosa's unmarked car pulled up behind the fire truck. Emma watched her get out, tall and grey-haired now, but still moving with the same determined stride that had made her a good cop. Rosa had never married, never had kids. She'd told Emma once that the missing girl's case had changed something in her, made her afraid to love something she might lose. Rosa approached the tarp and stared down at the party hats. Her face went pale. "After 28 years, she said softly. "After all this time they were trying to tell us something." Emma joined her. "The messages, Rosa. They mention me. They thought I might be able to help them."
Rosa looked at her sharply. "Help them how?" Emma swallowed hard. "I think they knew something was wrong. I think they tried to leave clues."
Rosa knelt beside the party hats, her hands hovering over them like she was afraid they might disappear. "We need to get these to the lab," she said, "but first I want to read every single message." They worked in silence, carefully photographing each hat before examining the writing inside. The messages were heartbreaking in their innocence and devastating in their implications. "I hid my diary under my mattress. It has clues. Ashley, age 12.
"Uncle Jim said we were going somewhere special, but this doesn't feel special." Madison, age 11.
Someone is coming upstairs. If we don't come home, look for the man with the beard. Kayla, age 10. Emma's hands trembled as she read Madison's message. Uncle Jim. That had to be Jim Walsh, Madison's neighbor who everyone called Uncle, even though he wasn't family. The friendly man who coached Little League, who always had candy in his pockets, who helped single mothers with yard work and car repairs. "Rosa," Emma whispered, "Madison wrote about Uncle Jim." Rosa looked up sharply. "Jim Walsh?" He moved to Florida right after the disappearance, said he couldn't handle the memories. Or he couldn't handle the investigation getting too close. They called for a forensics team and spent the next hour documenting everything. Each hat told part of the story. The girls had known something was wrong early in the evening. They'd tried to leave evidence, tried to help whoever might find them someday. By noon, the media had arrived. News vans lined the street, reporters shoving microphones at anyone who would talk. Emma watched from inside the house as neighbors gathered behind the police tape, some crying, some just staring in shock. Mrs. Martinez, Jenna's mother, pushed through the crowd. She was older now, grey-haired and bent with the weight of 28 years of grief. When she saw Emma, she stopped. "Emma," she said softly, "you were supposed to be there?" Emma nodded, unable to speak. "I used to be angry at you," Mrs. Martinez continued. "Angry that you got to grow up when my Jenna didn't. I'm sorry for that." "Mrs. Martinez,
No, listen, I'm not angry anymore. You survived for a reason. Maybe this is it. Maybe you're supposed to help us find out what happened to our girls.
Rosa appeared at Emma's side. Mrs. Martinez, we're going to reopen the case. We're going to find answers. The older woman nodded, tears streaming down her face. Jenna wrote about you, didn't she? In her hat? Emma swallowed hard. She thought I might be able to tell people what happened. Then tell them. Tell the world my daughter's story. That afternoon, Emma drove to her own house, a small ranch in the newer part of town. Her daughter Lily was at school, but she'd be home soon, and Emma didn't know how to explain any of this. How do you tell an 11-year-old that monsters exist and they sometimes wear friendly faces? Emma had spent Lily's entire life trying to keep her safe without traumatizing her. No sleepovers, no walking alone. No getting in cars with anyone, even people they knew. Lily thought her mum was overprotective. She had no idea her mum was terrified. Emma sat in her kitchen staring at her phone. She needed to call someone, but she didn't know who. Her ex-husband lived in another state and wouldn't understand. Her parents were dead. She'd never been good at maintaining friendships, too afraid to let people get close. The front door opened and Lily's voice called out, "Mom? Why are there news trucks on Maple Street?" Emma met her daughter in the hallway. Lily looked so much like Emma had at that age, small and dark-haired with curious eyes. But where Emma had been trusting, Lily was cautious. Emma had made sure of that. "Mom, you look weird. What's wrong?" Emma knelt down so she was at eye level with her daughter. "Lily, do you remember when I told you about why I don't like sleepovers?" Lily nodded. "You said something bad happened when you were little." "Something bad happened to my friends. They went to a sleepover and they never came home." Lily's eyes widened. "Never?" "Never. And today we found something that might help us understand what happened to them." "What did you find?" Emma took a deep breath. "Messages. They left messages, and one of them mentioned me." Lily was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then she asked the question Emma had been dreading. "Mom, is that why you're always scared? Is that why I can't have sleepovers?"
Emma felt tears welling up. "Yes, baby, that's why."
Lily hugged her tightly. "I'm sorry your friends got taken, Mum." "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." That evening, Rosa called with an update. "We pulled Jim Walsh's old records. He worked for the city utility department from 1998 to 2000. He had access to houses all over the neighborhood for meter readings and line inspections." "That explains how he could move around without suspicion," Emma said. "There's more. He wasn't alone. The original investigation found evidence of at least 2 other adults involved, a woman named Carol Atwell, who was supposed to substitute teach but never showed up for work after the disappearance, and a man named Frank Morrison." Emma's blood went cold. "Morrison? Like the fire captain?" "No relation. Frank Morrison was the night custodian at Riverside Elementary. He would have known all the girls, known their schedules, known which ones came from single-parent homes or had parents who worked late." "Where are they now?" "Carol Atwell disappeared completely. No record of her after January 2000. But Frank Morrison..." Rosa paused. "He's still alive. 73 years old, living in Sunset Manor, assisted living facility."
Emma felt something shift inside her, a cold rage she'd never experienced before. "He's been here all this time? Living in our town while those families suffered?"
"Emma, I need you to understand something. We don't have enough evidence to arrest him yet. The party hats help establish that something criminal happened, but we need more. We need someone who was there, someone who knows what happened." "You need me to talk to him?"
"I need you to help me interview him. You might be the only person who can get him to talk."
Emma closed her eyes, thinking of Lily, thinking of the messages in the party hats, thinking of Mrs. Martinez's tears. "When?"
"Tomorrow morning. Are you ready for this?"
Emma thought about 11-year-old girls writing goodbye letters to their parents. She thought about 28 years of unanswered questions. She thought about her own daughter, who deserved to grow up in a world where monsters were held accountable. "I'm ready." But as she hung up the phone, Emma wondered if she really was ready to face the man who had stolen her childhood and destroyed so many lives. Tomorrow, she would find out if her broken breathing had saved her for this moment, this choice, this chance to finally speak for the friends who could no longer speak for themselves. The house felt too quiet around her. Outside, she could see the glow of news cameras still stationed on Maple Street. The story was spreading now beyond their small town, beyond their small tragedy. Soon the whole world would know about 8 girls who went to a sleepover and never came home. Emma walked to Lily's room and found her daughter sitting on her bed, holding her phone. "Mom," Lily said quietly, "I looked up the story online. They're calling it the New Year's Eve disappearance." Emma sat beside her. "Are you scared?" Lily considered this. A little, but also proud. Proud. Proud that my mum survived. Proud that you're going to help catch the bad guys. Emma hugged her daughter close, wondering how an 11-year-old could be so wise, so brave. Maybe that's what children were before the world taught them to be afraid. Maybe that's what her friends had been in those final moments, writing their messages and hiding their hats. Not just victims, but fighters. Not just children, but heroes. Sunset Manor smelled like disinfectant and old coffee. Emma followed Rosa down the sterile hallway, her heart pounding so hard she thought the nurses might hear it. They'd spent the morning reviewing Morrison's file. 73 years old, mild dementia, no visitors in over 5 years. He'd been there since 2020, admitted after a stroke left him partially paralyzed. The irony wasn't lost on Emma. The man who had stolen the mobility and freedom of 8 children was now trapped in his own failing body. "Room 314, Rosa said, stopping outside a door marked with Morrison's name. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Emma nodded, though she wasn't sure of anything. What if he doesn't remember? Then we'll know soon enough. Rosa knocked and pushed open the door. Frank Morrison sat in a wheelchair by the window, staring out at the parking lot. He was smaller than Emma had expected, shrunken and grey, wearing a faded bathrobe and slippers. But his eyes were alert when he turned to look at them. "Mr. Morrison," Rosa said, showing her badge, "I'm Detective Morales. This is Emma Chen. We'd like to ask you some questions."
Morrison's eyes flickered to Emma, and something changed in his expression. Recognition. Fear.
"I know you," he said slowly. "You're the one who got away."
Emma felt the room tilt. 28 years collapsed into this moment, this admission. "You remember me?"
"Course I remember. You were supposed to be there. We had plans for all of you." His voice was raspy but clear. "But you got sick, didn't you? Asthma attack. Ruined everything." Rosa stepped forward. "Mr. Morrison, I'm recording this conversation. You have the right to remain silent." "Oh, shut up," Morrison interrupted. "I'm dying anyway. Stroke, dementia, the whole package. What are you going to do, arrest a corpse?"
Emma found her voice. "Where are they? Where are my friends?"
Morrison smiled, and it was the most horrible thing Emma had ever seen. "Which ones? The ones from 99? Or the ones from 2003? Or maybe you want to know about the Toledo group from 2007? Rosa's face went white. "There were others?" "Course there were others. You think we'd stop after one successful operation?" Morrison wheezed out a laugh. 8 girls vanished without a trace. No bodies, no evidence, no leads. It was perfect. Emma stepped closer to his wheelchair. "What did you do to them?" "What we were paid to do, clean, quiet, efficient, no mess, no fuss." Morrison's eyes gleamed with something sick and proud. "Jim handled recruitment. Carol managed transport. I provided the intelligence, the background checks, the family situations." "Intelligence?" Rosa asked. "I knew which kids had single parents, which ones had parents who worked nights, Which ones wouldn't be missed right away? I knew their schedules, their habits, their fears. Morrison looked directly at Emma. I knew about your asthma, about how your parents worried. That's why you were perfect. Fragile little thing, parents who'd blame themselves if you disappeared during an attack. Emma felt sick. You planned to take me specifically. You were the prize, quiet, smart, obedient, the kind of child who'd adapt quickly to new circumstances. Morrison's smile widened. But then you got sick, and we had to improvise. Take the whole group instead of just you. So 7 girls died because I wasn't there.
Oh, they didn't die, not right away. Morrison leaned forward in his wheelchair. See, that's what you never understood. We weren't killing children. We were relocating them. New homes, new families, new identities.
Rosa's voice was barely controlled. Human trafficking. Supply and demand. There are people out there, wealthy people, who want children but can't have them through legal channels. People who don't ask questions as long as the product is delivered as promised.
Emma grabbed the arms of Morrison's wheelchair. Product? You're talking about children.
I'm talking about business. 28 years, and you people never figured it out. You kept looking for bodies, for crime scenes, for evidence of violence, but there was no violence, just clean, efficient transfers. Where did you take them? Rosa demanded. Morrison shrugged. Different places. Jim had connections in Florida, Carol knew people in California. The beauty of the operation was that we never used the same route twice, never delivered to the same clients. Are they still alive? Emma's voice broke. Are my friends still alive? Some might be, depends on how well they adapted, how useful they proved to be. Morrison's eyes were cold. The smart ones, the pretty ones, they had value. The others... He shrugged again. Emma wanted to hit him, wanted to shake him until he told her everything. But Rosa put a restraining hand on her arm. Mr. Morrison, Rosa said carefully, if you help us locate these children, the DA might be willing to discuss a plea agreement. Morrison laughed, a wheezing sound that turned into a cough. Plea agreement. Lady, I just told you I'm dying. What are you going to do? Give me extra pudding at dinner.
You could help us find them, help us bring them home.
Home? Morrison's expression turned mocking. They don't remember home. By now they don't remember their real names, their real families. They're someone else's children, have been for decades. Emma felt something break inside her. You stole their entire lives. We gave them new lives, better lives in most cases, rich families, good schools, opportunities they never would have had. Morrison met her eyes. Your friend Madison, for instance, she's doing quite well for herself. Emma's blood froze. Madison? Madison Walsh? Oh yes, very popular with the clients. Young, blonde, well-behaved. She was adopted by a lovely family in Connecticut. Goes by Madison Hartwell now, I believe. Married to a doctor, 2 children of her own. Rosa stepped forward. You're saying Madison Walsh is alive? Last I heard, of course that was several years ago. People die, marriages end, children grow up and move away. Morrison smiled again. But yes, as of 2018, Madison was very much alive and completely unaware of her true origins. Emma couldn't breathe. Madison was alive. Her best friend, the birthday girl, the one who'd invited them all to the sleepover, was alive and living under another name. How do we find her? Emma whispered. Morrison considered this. Well, that depends. What's it worth to you? What do you want? Rosa asked. A better room, south-facing window, private bathroom, and I want my nephew to visit. Tommy Morrison lives in Riverside. He hasn't come to see me since I got here. That's it? A better room and a visit from your nephew? Morrison nodded. I'm a simple man with simple needs, and I'm curious to see how this all plays out. 28 years is a long time to keep a secret. Rosa looked at Emma, who nodded. They needed to know. The families needed to know. We'll make the arrangements, Rosa said. But first, you give us everything. Names, locations, contact information, everything you remember about the network. Morrison settled back in his wheelchair, looking pleased with himself. "Well then, detective, I hope you brought a notebook. This is going to take a while." As Morrison began to talk, Emma felt the weight of 28 years lifting from her shoulders. Her friends weren't dead. They were out there, living different lives, but they were alive. And now, finally, there was a chance to bring them home. But as Morrison's story unfolded, Emma realized that bringing them home might be more complicated than she'd ever imagined. How do you reunite someone with a family they don't remember? How do you reclaim an identity that was stolen before you were old enough to understand what identity meant? Outside the window, snow had begun to fall, covering the parking lot in pristine white. Emma watched the flakes drift down and wondered if her friends ever looked at snow and felt a strange sadness they couldn't explain, if somewhere deep inside they remembered winter nights and sleepover parties and the childhood that had been taken from them. Soon, she thought. Soon they would all know the truth. Morrison talked for 3 hours. Rosa's notebook filled with names, addresses, dates and connections that painted a picture of systematic child trafficking spanning decades. Jim Walsh had moved to Tampa and died in 2015. Carol Atwell had changed her name to Carol Stevens and was living in a senior community in Phoenix. The network had evolved, adapted, continued operating until 2010, when stricter adoption laws made their business model too risky. Madison wasn't the only one, Morrison said as the afternoon wore on. Sophie Chen ended up with a family in Oregon. Maria Santos went to Nevada. The others... He paused, consulting some internal ledger of human misery. Jenna Martinez had behavioral issues. Last I heard, she was in a group home in California. Emma felt each name like a physical blow, her friends scattered across the country, living as strangers to themselves. Do they remember anything? The younger ones adapted better. New identities, new memories, new families who loved them. Some of the older ones... Morrison shrugged. Memory is a stubborn thing. Sometimes it surfaces at inconvenient moments. Rosa looked up from her notes. What happens to the ones who remember? Morrison's smile faded. That depends on the family. Some seek professional help, therapy to deal with what they call false memories or trauma responses. Others... He didn't finish the sentence.
Others what? Emma demanded.
Others become problems that need to be solved. The room went cold. Emma understood now why Morrison had been so confident, so casual about revealing everything. The network might be defunct, but its victims were still out there, still vulnerable. We need to find them, Emma said. All of them. We need to warn them. Warn them about what? Morrison asked. That their entire lives are lies? That the people they call parents are criminals who bought them like merchandise? That their children, their marriages, their careers are all built on stolen identities? Rosa stood up. Mr. Morrison, this interview is over. You'll be transferred to county jail pending formal charges. On what grounds? I haven't committed any crimes in this jurisdiction recently. Conspiracy, kidnapping, human trafficking, for starters. Morrison wheezed out another laugh. Good luck proving it. I'm a senile old man with dementia. My testimony won't hold up in court. Emma stared at him. You planned this. You've been waiting for someone to find you. I've been waiting to see if you'd figure it out. 28 years, and you never looked in the right direction. You kept searching for graves when you should have been searching for lives. As they left Sunset Manor, Emma felt overwhelmed by the enormity of what they'd learned. 7 friends were alive, but they were strangers now. Finding them would be only the beginning of a much more complicated process. Rosa's phone rang as they reached the parking lot. Detective Morales. She listened for a moment, then looked at Emma with wide eyes. We'll be right there. What is it? Someone just walked into the police station, a woman who says she's Madison Walsh. They drove back to the station in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. Emma tried to imagine what Madison looked like now, whether she would recognize her childhood friend. More importantly, she wondered if Madison remembered anything or if she was here for an entirely different reason. The woman waiting in interview room 2 was unmistakably Madison, despite 28 years and a completely different life. Same blonde hair, same blue eyes, same nervous habit of twisting her wedding ring when she was anxious. She wore expensive clothes and carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted her place in the world. Until now. "Madison," Emma said softly as she entered the room.
Madison looked up, and Emma saw recognition flicker across her face. Not the instant recognition of someone remembering a childhood friend, but something deeper, something buried.
"I know you," Madison said slowly, "but I don't know how." Emma sat across from her. "I'm Emma Chen. We went to school together." "No, that's not." Madison frowned, pressing her fingers to her temples. "I went to school in Connecticut. I grew up in Hartford with my parents, Dr. and Mrs. Hartwell." Rosa joined them, setting a file on the table. "Mrs. Hartwell, can you tell us why you're here?" Madison's hands shook slightly. "I saw the news story about the party hats. When they showed the pictures, I had a panic attack. My husband had to bring me to the emergency room." "Why did the pictures upset you?" "I don't know, but when I saw them I could smell pizza and hear children laughing. I could feel—" She paused, struggling with the memory. "I could feel cardboard against my fingers, like I was holding one of those hats." Emma leaned forward. "Madison, what's your earliest memory?" That's a strange question. Why would you ask that?"
"Please, just tell me."
Madison was quiet for a long moment. "I remember being in a hospital. I was maybe 12 or 13. My parents said I'd been in an accident, that I'd had some memory loss from a head injury. They showed me pictures of our family, told me stories about my childhood, helped me remember who I was." Emma felt her heart breaking. "What kind of accident?" "A car accident. They said I was lucky to survive, that some memory loss was normal after that kind of trauma." Madison looked between Emma and Rosa. "But lately I've been having dreams. Strange dreams about a different house, different people. A woman who wasn't my mother calling me for dinner. A birthday party that felt more real than any of my actual birthday memories." Rosa slid a photograph across the table. It was the class photo from 1999, all the girls lined up with their teacher. "Do you recognize anyone in this picture?" Madison stared at the photo for a long time. When she looked up, tears were streaming down her face. "That's me, the girl in the pink dress, that's me, but how is that possible?" Emma reached across the table and touched Madison's hand. "Your name was Madison Walsh. You lived at 1247 Maple Street with your grandmother. You invited our whole class to a New Year's Eve sleepover party to celebrate the millennium." "No," Madison whispered. "No, that's not right. I'm Madison Hartwell. I've always been Madison Hartwell." "Madison, I need you to listen to me. You were taken from that party, you and 6 other girls. A man named Frank Morrison, along with Jim Walsh and Carol Atwell, kidnapped all of you and sold you to families who wanted children."
Madison pulled her hand away. "That's insane. You're saying my parents bought me, that my entire life is a lie?" "I'm saying you were stolen from your real family and given to people who raised you as their own."
Madison stood up abruptly. "This is crazy. I have a life, a family, children of my own. My parents love me. They've always loved me."
Rosa spoke gently. "Mrs. Hartwell, we can do a DNA test. We can prove whether or not you're Madison Walsh."
"And what if I am? What then? Do I abandon the only family I've ever known? Do I tell my children that their grandmother isn't really their grandmother? Do I destroy their lives the way you're trying to destroy mine?" Emma understood Madison's fear, but she also understood something else. "Madison, there are other families who never stopped looking for you. Mrs. Walsh, your real grandmother, she died 5 years ago, still hoping you'd come home. She lit a candle for you every year." Madison sank back into her chair. "I have memories of her, fragments, an old woman who smelled like lavender and made the best chocolate chip cookies." She looked up at Emma. How is that possible if the Hartwells are my real family? Because deep down you remember, you've always remembered. Outside the interview room, snow continued to fall. Emma watched Madison struggle with the truth, watched her entire world shift and crack. Finding her friends was supposed to be the happy ending, but Emma was beginning to understand that some stolen things could never be fully returned. Tomorrow, Rosa would contact the other families, the ones Morrison had named. They would find Sophie in Oregon, Maria in Nevada, and the others. They would offer DNA tests and explanations and the truth that might heal some wounds while opening others. But tonight, Emma just sat with her childhood friend and watched her remember who she used to be. 3 months later, Emma stood in the community center on Maple Street, watching families reunite across a room that felt both hopeful and heartbreaking. The DNA tests had confirmed what Morrison's confessions had revealed. 7 of her childhood friends were alive, scattered across the country, living under different names with different histories. Sophie Chen had flown in from Portland, now Sophie Williams, a veterinarian with 2 teenage sons who still called their adoptive grandparents every Sunday. Maria Santos, now Maria Rodriguez, had driven up from Las Vegas where she ran a small restaurant with her husband. They came with questions, with fear, with children who didn't understand why their mothers were crying. But not all the reunions were possible. Jenna Martinez had been found in a group home in Sacramento, her behavioral issues, Morrison mentioned, having led to multiple failed placements and a lifetime of institutional care. She died 3 years earlier, never knowing her real name or that her mother had spent 28 years lighting candles and waiting. Ashley Cooper had been adopted by a family in Texas, but when Rosa contacted them, they'd hung up the phone. Some secrets they learned were guarded more fiercely than others. Kayla Bennett had simply vanished. The family Morrison claimed had taken her had no record of any adoption. Either Morrison's memory was failing, or something had gone wrong with Kayla's placement. Rosa was still investigating, still hoping, but Emma could see the doubt in her eyes. Emma watched Mrs. Martinez, now in her 70s, embrace Sophie Williams and sob into her shoulder. "You look just like my Jenna did," she whispered, "just like her." It was both beautiful and terrible. These weren't the children who'd been taken. They were adults with their own families, their own traumas, their own complicated relationships with the truth. Some, like Madison, had chosen to maintain their adoptive family relationships while slowly reconnecting with their biological roots. Others, like Maria, had cut all ties with the people who'd raised them, unable to reconcile love with the knowledge of its criminal foundation. Rosa approached Emma near the refreshment table. "The FBI wants to interview you again. They're building cases against the surviving network members." Emma nodded. Carol Atwell had been arrested in Phoenix, though her lawyers were claiming dementia made her unfit for trial. Frank Morrison had died in his sleep 2 weeks after their interview, taking whatever remaining secrets he had to his grave. Justice, it seemed, would be as complicated as everything else about this case. "There's something else," Rosa said quietly. "We got a hit on one of the missing children cases from 2003. A boy named Timothy Brooks. He contacted us through the FBI tip line." Emma felt a familiar surge of hope and dread. "Where is he?" "Chicago. He's a teacher now, married, no kids. Says he's always known his adoption story didn't add up, but never knew how to investigate it." Rosa paused. "He wants to meet you." "Me? Why?"
Because you're the one who survived the first group. Because you're the one who figured out how to find the rest of us." Rosa smiled sadly. "Because you're proof that sometimes the ones who get away don't really get away at all."
Emma understood. She'd spent 28 years carrying the weight of her friend's disappearance, and now she'd spend the rest of her life helping others carry the weight of their stolen childhoods. It wasn't the ending she'd imagined, but it was the one that made sense. Across the room, Madison was showing her own children pictures from the class yearbook, trying to explain how their mother had once been someone else entirely. Her 10-year-old daughter, Emma noticed, looked remarkably like Madison had at that age. The same blonde hair, the same curious eyes, the same trust in the world that had made Madison such an easy target. Emma's phone buzzed, a text from Lily, who was at a friend's house for the afternoon. "Mum, can I have my first sleepover next weekend?" Sarah's mum said yes. Emma stared at the message for a long time. For 28 years, her answer had been an automatic no. But watching these families navigate their complicated reunions, seeing the strength her friends had developed despite everything they'd endured, Emma realized something had changed. She typed back, "We'll talk about it when I get home." But probably yes. The response was immediate. "Really? OMG, Mum, thank you!" Emma smiled, feeling something inside her chest loosen for the first time in decades. Her friends hadn't just survived. They'd built lives, raised children, found love, despite having their own capacity for trust shattered. They'd proven that stolen childhoods didn't have to mean stolen futures. As the reunion continued around her, Emma found herself thinking about the party hats hidden in that chimney for 28 years. The girls who'd written those messages hadn't just been leaving evidence, they'd been leaving hope. Hope that someone would find them, hope that someone would remember, hope that their stories would eventually be told. "Tell my mum I love her and I'm sorry I forgot to feed Whiskers." Emma got sick. Maybe she can tell everyone what happened to us. "If you find this, we tried to be brave like Emma taught us." They had been brave. Braver than Emma had ever realized. And now, finally, their courage had been rewarded. Not with the reunion they'd dreamed of as children, but with something more complex and perhaps more valuable, the truth and the knowledge that they had never been forgotten. Mrs. Martinez approached Emma as the afternoon was winding down. "I wanted to thank you," she said, taking Emma's hands in her weathered ones, "for never giving up, for remembering their names. I could never forget them."
"I know, and that's why they chose you to survive. Not because you were lucky, but because you were strong enough to carry their story until it could be told."
Emma felt tears well up. "I wish I could have saved them." "You did save them. Maybe not in the way you wanted, but you saved their stories, their memories, their truth." Mrs. Martinez squeezed her hands. "That's a different kind of rescue, but it's rescue all the same." As Emma drove home that evening, she passed 1247 Maple Street. The house was being renovated now, turned into a community centre for missing children's advocacy. Madison had donated the money for the project, saying it felt right to transform the place where their story began into somewhere that might prevent other stories like theirs. In the front windows, 7 candles still burned every evening. But now they burned alongside 7 new ones representing hope instead of just loss. The living as well as the missing. The found as well as the forgotten. Emma pulled into her own driveway and sat for a moment, thinking about Lily's sleepover request. There would be safety measures, of course, background checks, multiple adults present, constant communication, but there would also be trust and laughter and the kind of normal childhood joy that Emma had been too afraid to allow. Inside, Lily was waiting with homework spread across the kitchen table. "Mum, did you really say yes to the sleepover?" Emma sat down beside her daughter. "I said we'd talk about it, and I think the answer is yes, with some conditions." "What kind of conditions?" "The kind that keep you safe without keeping you from living." Lily hugged her tightly. "I love you, Mum, and I'm proud of you for helping find your friends." Emma held her daughter close, thinking about all the children who'd never made it home, and all the ones who had but didn't remember the way back. Tomorrow, she would help Timothy Brooks navigate his own complicated reunion. Next week, she would let Lily have her sleepover. And someday, maybe, there would be no more children hidden in chimneys, no more messages written in desperation, no more families lighting candles for the missing. Until then, she would keep remembering, keep telling their stories, keep making sure that no name stayed forgotten and no child's courage went unrecognized. The snow outside had melted, revealing the first green shoots of spring. New growth, Emma thought, new possibilities, new chances to get it right. She helped Lily with her homework, and for the first time in 28 years, the house felt truly safe.